my next question. So, as someone who has been in Washington for over 25 years, have you ever seen Washington this divided before? And also, do you think that Washington is truly divided? And what will you and your Democratic and Republican colleagues do to ensure the American people, politicians on both sides, can work together? Because I think a lot of well, I shouldn't give my personal opinion on this, but Americans do feel that Washington is truly divided. Would you agree?
Well, I think America's divided. Washington's a reflection of America. We each represent 435 of us. We each represent 1/435th of the country, okay? And we reflect the values of our districts, the hopes and dreams, the concerns of our district. And so when you say Washington's divided, America's divided. Everybody can see this. That it's like there's two planets right now in America with two different sets of views and facts. We've been introduced to, this new term, alternative facts. So Congress just reflects that. So it's not that Washington's divided, it's the country that's divided. And we have a president who has been at the forefront of causing this division. And I think what a lot of people yearn for is for this chaos to stop and for us to once again be the United States of America, to work together, because that's always best for us when we work together. We have different ideas on the best way to do things, right? There's no problem with that. The founding fathers wanted a vigorous debate in Washington, D.C. So if the debate is the best way to do something, that's worth having. And then after that debate, there's a vote. And once that vote is taken, people need to get around that. People need to rally around those things. People need to go back home and explain, we didn't get everything that we wanted to do in this piece of legislation, but we got a lot of what we think is important. And it's something maybe we can improve on in the future, depending on what the makeup of the Congress looks like. That's the way it's supposed to work. So, if America was unified in certain things and said, we want this. A good example, Americans got unified around pre-existing conditions. The Republicans found that out in the midterm election when they got killed. 60 some of them lost their seats. Guess what? You can't find a single Republican that's not for pre-existing conditions now, because it was made pretty clear in the country, whether you were a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or didn't even vote, that you thought that was an important issue. So now we're all in agreement on pre-existing conditions. We're fighting about a bunch of other stuff, but nobody's fighting about that again. I think we reflect our districts, and those that don't reflect their districts aren't in Congress very long. Somebody else takes their place. So yes, the country is clearly divided, which has caused Washington to clearly be divided. And hopefully this election will clear up some of the division. That's what I think all of us would like to see. I think we'd like to see an election where people speak clearly. I think that happens when we get the most people we can to vote. Democracy doesn't work when only 10 or 20% of the people participate. Democracy works when we all participate. And so I think that's why our party has tried to champion making it as easy as possible for people to vote, while we watch Republicans trying to make it as tough as possible for people to vote. It isn't Democrats going to the Supreme Court trying to say, let's invalidate these ballots that come in legally. I mean, imagine in Pennsylvania that you voted by mail before November 3rd, and for some reason the post office doesn't get your ballot to the County Elections Bureau till November 4th or 5th. Now that's a valid vote. And yet we have people going to court as we speak, asking the Supreme Court to say, you can't count that vote. That's not democracy. That's voter suppression. And that's being done by one party, and it's not mine. So these are facts. And we know because these cases are in front of the court as we speak. And any day now, the Supreme Court's going to make a ruling on that. We wanted to count our ballots, not announce the vote, but process mail-in ballots 3 days early. Our Republican state legislature said no. Now, what would that have meant? It would have meant that on election night, we could find out what the results were, because they could start processing the mail-in ballots, not release the results till after 8 o'clock when the polls closed. But because our Republican legislature, and just coincidentally, legislatures in Michigan and Wisconsin, said you guys can't count your ballots. In Florida and North Carolina, they can, but not in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The result of that is going to be on election night here in Pennsylvania, which may be the state that determines who the next president of the United States is. We're not going to be able to say what the election result is on election night. And if it takes a couple more days after that, because each county counts its own ballots and has its own machines and its own processes, people are going to start to question, well, on election night, this person was ahead. Now, all of a sudden, this other person's ahead, simply because our state legislature intentionally wanted to create chaos and said, no, you can't process your ballots early like a bunch of other states are doing. So we're going to start counting ballots at 7 a.m., which is when we're allowed to start processing ballots. They have to be taken out of the security envelope, unfolded, stacked, and be ready to put into these high-speed counting machines. And we'll have, Allegheny County did a pretty good job in the primary, by the way. We were one of the few counties that actually had our act together and had a lot of machines and technicians on site to fix any problems with the machines. And we pretty much knew, I was in a competitive primary, and I pretty much knew where I stood on election night. We didn't have 100% in, but we had like close to 80, 90% of the vote in. And if you get that much of the vote in, we'll be able to know where it sits in Pennsylvania. But unfortunately, I think we're one of the states that won't know what the results are in our state till a little bit later, maybe a day or two after the election.